In this tutorial series, I will show you how to build a simple checklist app for Jira Cloud using Atlassian's new development platform, Forge. We'll start with a minimal example and end up with a fully functional app. Here's how the result will look like. The app adds a panel to Jira issues where you can add tasks, mark tasks as complete, and delete tasks. The full source code of the project is available on GitHub. If you haven't heard about Forge, here's a brief intro. Forge is a function-as-a-service platform created specifically for building apps that work within Atlassian products like Jira and Confluence. With Forge, you can focus on just writing the application code and not worry about infrastructure and maintenance. The platform takes care of that. An interesting feature of the platform is Forge UI, a framework for building dynamic user interfaces with a declarative syntax that resembles React. Now let's get to the coding part. First, you need to go through the Getting Started guide that's published on the Forge developer website. This involves installing Node, Docker, and Forge CLI, logging into the CLI tool with your personal API token, and setting up a free developer site. Alright, so I have my development environment set up. Time to start the project. And the first command we're going to run in the terminal is forge create. It asks us for the name of our app. Let's call it checklists for Jira. And conveniently, Forge CLI comes with a set of project templates so that we're not starting from scratch. What we're building here is a Jira issue panel. So let's see if there's a template for that. And there is one. Let's select it. It's gonna take a little bit of time creating the app and registering it. If you run it the first time, it may take a little bit longer than what you see now. Okay, it created a project for me in this checklist for Jira directory. I'd actually like the project directory to be shorter and to be all lowercase. I'm gonna go and rename it. So if I list the current directory, here's what it created, checklist for Jira. I would rename it to something shorter. So I'm going to move checklist for Jira to simply Jira-checklists. And we're going to cd into that directory. So if we look at the files here are all the files that Forge CLI created for us from the project template. We can actually go ahead and run this generated app. And to do this, we need to execute two commands. First, we need to deploy it to Atlassian's execution environment. To do this, we run the command forge deploy. Now we need to run forge install to actually install this app onto a particular Jira instance. Yes, this is Jira. Now it asks you for your Jira site. I already have one set up over here that I'm going to copy and paste. If you don't have one, just a reminder that as a developer, you can create one for free. I'm gonna hit enter. It'll take me through an authorization prompt to make sure that I, as a user logged into this Jira instance, authorize to install this app. Click accept. And we should be done. Go back to the terminal. It tells us that we're done. Install complete. Now let's see if it works. The app is supposed to be a new Jira issue panel. So let's make a new issue. We'll just call it new story. Click Create. We're not going to see it on the creation screen. We need to open the issue. Let it load. Initially, the panel is not visible, but there's a button to toggle it. Let's click on that button. Now it's loading the panel, and it simply displays Hello World. This is what came from the project template. Now let's inspect the generated code to see how this is accomplished. Here are the project files. In the root, we have package.json because this is a Node application. The contents of this file are pretty standard. The more interesting part is manifest YAML. This is specific to Forge. Every Forge app has a manifest YAML, and that manifest describes our application. Down here, we have an entry for app, and this is a unique application ID that gets generated when we run Forge init, and the name of our application that appears in the dialog where a user installs an app or enables an app the first time. Under modules, we have the features of the Forge platform that we are using in our app. In our case, all our app does right now is implement a Jira issue panel. In here we have the title of the issue panel and the icon for the button that enables it, and the name of the function that gets called when the issue panel is open. So this is main, and that maps to the function module over here, so it cross-references it. And the handler is index run. Let's actually go to the source, the only JavaScript file we have here so far. That's index.jsx. Index.run in manifest referred to this run function, which renders our issue panel component imported from Forge UI over here. And it renders an app, which right now just renders some text. This syntax is very similar to React. It uses JSX. So if you've worked with React before, this will look very familiar. Let's make a couple of small changes to get a feel of the framework we're going to be working with and the development process. But first, what I'd like to do is I'd like to initialize a Git repository here. That way, it'll be easier for us to review our changes along the way. So I'm in the project directory here, and I'm gonna do git init, initialize empty Git repository. Now if I type git status, it'll show me that all these files that Forge generated for us for our new project are untracked. We're simply gonna commit them all. Notice how Forge already created a git ignore file that, let's look at it actually. So it already ignores node modules and a couple of other common files that you don't want to commit. We can add more here if we need to, but everything here we actually do want to commit. So I will git add current directory, and I will git commit with a message initial commit. This is a common message people use for their first commit. I'm not going to be original here. All right, so now if we do git status, there's nothing to commit, and we can make some changes. Let's change what the issue panel says. Instead of hello world, let's say hello Jira. Now let's go and refresh the Jira issue page and see what happens. Here's our checklist panel, and it still says hello world. This is because the code that we just changed has not been deployed to Atlassian's environment. Now we have two options here. One, we can run forge deploy again, and this will deploy the latest code. But you can imagine it will be tedious to run this command every time we make a change, especially when we're just experimenting with the project. Luckily, there's a better way, and it is Forge Tunnel. Let's run this and I'll explain how it works. What Forge Tunnel does is it will run our app locally with Docker. This is what the output says. And it will tunnel all requests to our app to our local environment instead of Atlassian servers. And it will also automatically reload the code every time we change it, which makes it very convenient and saves a lot of time and just gives us faster feedback. So it says listening to requests. Now let's reload this page again. Now it says hello Jira. If we go back to the terminal, we also see that it showed an invocation record. This is where the application logs are going to be printed, which is another nice thing. We don't have to go and find the logs somewhere or run a special command. The logs will just be printed here, very common for development workflows. Let's change the text again just to see that it automatically reloads. Now we're building a checklist app, so why don't we say something like there are no tasks, because there are no tasks yet. If we go to the terminal, we see that it's automatically reloaded the code, took a couple of seconds, and it's ready to go again. Now we'll reload the page. And now it says there are no tasks. Let's also change the title of our panel. Right now it says checklist for Jira, which is the same as our application name, but we already have it right here in the button. So this feels redundant. And also what the panel contains is just one checklist. So I think it makes more sense to call the panel simply checklist. The title of the panel is stored in the manifest, so let's go and edit this. Here's our manifest, and here's our issue panel. We should be able to simply rename this to checklist. We're not going to touch the app name over here. This is fine. We changed the panel title. Now, at the time of this recording, changes to the manifest are not automatically reloaded when you run Forge tunnel. You do need to stop your tunnel and run Forge deploy for manifest changes to take effect. So let's do that. I stop the tunnel and I'll do Forge deploy. I'm guessing this is because the things that you define in the manifest are these fundamental building blocks of your application. Say if you added a new module, it would need to redeploy the app completely instead of just reloading the components, the UI part. Okay, so it redeployed. I'm going to go ahead and start Forge tunnel for future changes. But if we go back and refresh, we should see the new panel title. And there it is, checklist, there are no tasks. Let's review the changes that we made so far. I'm using this GUI for Git called Git Cola. It makes it a little bit easier to review changes and commit them, especially when you have made a lot of changes. So the thing that we just did is we changed the title. Let's stage this change. And we changed the text that's displayed in the panel. For commit summary, let's just say change text, change panel title and body text, and commit. All right, we're ready to keep hacking away at this. Let's now try to display something that looks more like a checklist. A checklist has to have checkboxes and some text next to them, and you should be able to check and uncheck items, possibly delete items. So the first thing that we need to look for is how to make a checkbox. Let's focus on that. So I'm on the Forge developer website. I'm going to go to Preference, and we're interested in UI components. See what we have here. There's button that may be useful later, form, checkbox group looks closest to what we're looking for. Okay, so it looks like all the fields components are inside of the form. Checkbox group. Okay, here are the properties of a checkbox group and a checkbox. It looks like you have to wrap checkboxes in the checkbox group from what I'm gathering here. Oh great, here's a code example. Let's just copy paste it in our project and see what happens. Alright, so we're gonna get rid of this temporarily. We may still want to display there are no tasks text when there are no tasks, but we're going to worry about this later. So we added these new components, checkbox group and checkbox. We need to import them from Forge UI. Not checkbox group, checkbox. All right. Now this line is getting long and we're likely going to need to add more components here. So I'm going to go ahead and split this into new lines. This reads easier and also makes it easier to add new items here without making a super long line. Okay, this should work. Go back to Jira and refresh. Okay, we got an error. It is helpful that the platform displays errors here without you having to hunt for them in the logs. So it says that checkbox group must be within a form. We did see a form up here, so we probably just need to wrap everything in that form component. So we'll need to import form, and let's look at this code example. Yeah, so they have a form and a text field and a checkbox group on that form. Okay, we can do that. So I'm going to go ahead and import the form component. You're going to be doing this a lot. Every time you need a new component or anything from the Forge library, you need to import this. So add form, and let's look at the required properties. I don't want to worry about actually setting up the form and handling its actions. I just want to build some UI first. So it looks like the only required properties of a form are children and onSubmit, which I'm guessing is the form handler, what happens when you submit the form. Now, a note to those who are not familiar with React, children are what you put inside of a component. It can be a literal property, children, or it can be implicit. So if I just say form like this, and my checkbox group is inside of a form, what's happening under the hood, and I'm imagining this is how it works in React, and since Forge UI heavily borrows from React, it must work the same way. I put checkbox group inside of a form. What the framework does under the hood is it takes these components and passes them as a children property to the parent component, the form in this case. So even though it says that there's a children prop, we're not going to pass it explicitly. The children are these children. But we do need to pass a onSubmit handler, or it might give us another error. I'm not going to worry about doing anything in the onSubmit handler, so I'll just create an empty function here like this. Let's see if we got it right. Great, we got a checklist, And we can even check and uncheck items. Good progress. Now we don't need this products subtitle. Let's get rid of that. We also don't need the submit button. At least I think we don't need it, but I'm not sure we can remove it if we use the form. Let's deal with that later. So it looks like products is coming from this label, and hopefully I can remove it. Hopefully it's not a required prop. Name is probably just how the data will be represented when the form is submitted. So instead of products, let's call it tasks. And let's change the values to something that more resembles a checklist. So let's say do this. For value, let's have values be the same as the display labels. Do that, copy it, paste it into the value, and let's add another item. Take a break. Take a break. Okay. So save the file. Because we're tunneling, the code should reload automatically and we should see our new checklist here. Great. And it still appears to work. Now if we click submit, nothing will happen because we haven't written any code to process the form submission, but that's okay. Now these checklist items are obviously hard-coded right now. We know that in the future we'll need to let the user create them, and our job will be to save them in some data store. We don't know exactly how we're going to implement this yet, but we'll take a first step. We're going to save these items in a JavaScript array, and we'll generate the checkboxes off of that array. Let's do it. I'm going to create a new variable, const tasks, and this will be our array. I'm going to copy these task texts and wrap them in strings. And now we need to generate checkboxes with this data. So I'll keep these checkboxes at the bottom for now, but what we need is we'll start a curly brace block, which means we're not rendering components, we're writing JavaScript code. Tasks.map, and each element is a task. And we're going to transform, so map transforms all elements of an array into something else. And this something else will be a checkbox component. And it will hold the tasks text. Task. So now we can delete these. And this should work. Let's check it out. Okay, great. This still works. It doesn't look like we accomplished much, but we did start changing our program to be more dynamic. Now it'll be easier to, instead of just reading the task off of a hard-coded array, we can read it off of something else, some data store, some state that the application maintains. The UI now is more flexible. It doesn't care about where the tasks are coming from. They can be read off of anything. Let's review the changes that we've made so far. I'm going to switch to Git Cola to show the Git diff. So we imported additional things from Forge UI, and we changed our component from displaying just static text, there are no tasks, to displaying a list of checkboxes from this array over here. Actually, let's go ahead and commit this change. That way we can incrementally see how we change the program, and this will serve us as some kind of checkpoint system. I'm gonna stage the entire file, and for the commit message, let's write something like first UI stub. Okay.